Today we will be unboxing an iPhone 5 I picked up on eBay for only $25. Now the reason I got this is because it is running its original software version iOS 6 and it appears to have the 9900 IMEI activation error. So let's get this unboxed and see what we have. Looks to be in decent condition, which is kind of what you want to see. Let's see if we get any power. And I do see the older style Apple logo indicating this is 100% running on iOS 6, because on iOS 7 you would get that flatter style Apple logo that we know today. And okay, we boot into the slide to setup of iOS 6. Okay, so weirdly enough, I just connected this up to iTunes and it activated perfectly fine, even though this is a 9900 IMEI. Super weird. Now, I do know 9900 IMEIs have better rates of activating on A6, which is kind of common. So yeah, let's go check out what version we have here. And okay, looks like we have a 16 gig model on 6.1.3, which really isn't what I wanted to see, but at least it's iOS 6. And yeah, now let's talk about the specs and history of the iPhone 5. This iPhone released September the 21st of 2012, with of course it launching with iOS 6. It had storage options ranging from 16 gig all the way up until 64, so you got 16, 32, and 64. It came in two color options, that of course being black and slate, and white and silver. It was also the first iPhone to increase the screen size from 3.5 inches that you would see on the 4S or iPhone 4 to a full 4 inches on that iPhone 5. And as you can see, it really did not make the screen much more wider, it just made it much taller. It also happened to be the last iPhone overseen by Steve Jobs, so his design philosophy of having iPhones fit in one hand still applies to this design. As you can see, my hand can very easily go from the bottom to the top of the screen. I can very easily use this with one hand. It also now featured the A6 chip with a massively better GPU compared to A5, now featuring 3 cores. The CPU, although had a minor improvement in terms of how it was clocked, now being clocked at 1.3 GHz on the 5 versus 1 GHz on A5. It was also the first iPhone to support 4G LTE technology, which was first seen on that iPad 3rd gen, of course. The front camera is virtually the same compared to the iPhone 4S with the same 8 megapixels. Where the camera really sees an improvement though is in the selfie camera, going from VGA quality on that iPhone 4S to 1.2 megapixels on the iPhone 5. Although it does seem the iPhone 5 did get zooming technology, as you can see, but in terms of actual quality, the 4S is basically the same. The battery on the iPhone 5 also had a slight improvement from the iPhone 4S, of course, going from about, allegedly, according to Apple, of course, 200 hours on that 4S to 225 on the iPhone 5. And with the brand new A6 chip, the RAM size also got a pretty big improvement, doubling from 512 megabytes on this 4S to a full gigabyte on the 5. So the iPhone 5 really performs a lot better compared to your standard iPhone 4S. And considering the games of the time, you really did not need anything that powerful, but this was pretty powerful for 2012 standards. And now let's focus on the biggest thing with this iPhone 5. It now featured a much more radically different design. It did feature the same kind of boxy look with square edges and everything, but everything else is very much different. So if we look at the back, you now have a metal casing going around this bit with glass cutouts up here, and you also get this new thing Apple called the diamond chamfered edge going all around the device, and you can kind of see it if I zoom really in there. You can kind of see it. It sort of shines around the bezels of the screen, and you get the same thing on the back, and it looks really cool. Of course, this is absent from the 4S though, and the 4S just has a all glass back look with the same kind of metal band going around it. But the 5 also now featured a much more thinner and lighter design, and as you can see, it is so thin that this iPhone 5 is actually slightly bent in terms of its housing, but it is very much thinner. So here is a 4S and here is an iPhone 5, and you can see what I mean. And if you hold one of these iPhone 5s in your hand, you'll see what I mean. This is super thin and light. And the iPhone 5 also was the first iPhone to feature the lightning connector, as you can see down here. You see, the 30-pin connector that you would get on the 4S and all previous iPhones was kind of getting outdated by this point, and Apple was kind of being pressured to update their connector, mainly because the 30-pin is not reversible, and it charges super slow, and it is also really bulky. So the iPhone 5 got the lightning connector, which was all new for 2012. It was reversible, meaning you could put your your connector in, like top side or down side, really didn't matter. And the lightning connector was also way more smaller and it would charge way faster. Now let's talk a bit about iOS 6 on this device. iOS 6 is really the last of its time and very unique. First of all, it's the last iOS version to feature Apple's older skeuomorphic design. And if you do not know what skeuomorphism is, it's basically a design that mimics real-life objects. You can see this in, say, like the Notepad application, where the Notes app looks like a real notepad. The camera app's icon looks like a real camera lens. And you can also see skeuomorphism with the overall linen design of this whole operating system, like seen in like the folders, for example. And everything has shadows and everything, and it's just very realistic. And we all know a year later, Apple would throw this design out of the window in favor of flat design. And you may ask, what even is the reason for Apple doing this? Like, why would they flatten everything? It's not as simple as Apple wanted to modernize everything, because not many companies during this time in like 2012, 2013 were actually using flat design. You see, on iOS 6, Apple had implemented a new Maps application known as Apple Maps. And on previous iOS versions, you would just get Google Maps. And it had a very rough launch. It was super buggy, and especially like the overhead, like 3D looking satellite images that you would get looked super buggy. And another way you can tell this is kind of undercooked in terms of it being finished and everything. If you look at that icon right there, you can see it shows someone driving off an overpass. And the lead dev of Apple Maps in 2012 was a guy named Scott Forstall. And he was not your ordinary dude that just made the Maps app. No, he was the lead designer of majority of Apple's iOS skeuomorphic era. But with the massive controversy that came with the absolute awful state of Apple Maps, Apple wanted to apologize. So Tim Cook wrote up an apology letter and he wanted Scott Forstall to sign it, which of course he refused. And the result was somewhat a culmination of past things that had happened. You see, ever since the death of Steve Jobs, Scott really did not have anyone to advocate for skeuomorphic designs. You see, Steve was a pretty big advocate for skeuomorphic designs, and Tim Cook was not really as pro-skeuomorphic as him. And Forstall also frequently clashed with the hardware designer at the time, Jony Ive, which will come into picture in a second, and other top executives at Apple. And this was kind of the final straw between Tim Cook and Scott, which they would fire and replace with the hardware designer I mentioned, Jony Ive. And now Jony was a pretty big advocate for flat and minimalist designs. So with the following year came the biggest visual redesign Apple has ever done, bigger than Liquid Glass and iOS 11. And that of course would be iOS 7. And now everything was flat and minimalistic, from the things I mentioned earlier, like the Notepad application and that camera icon, which looks way less like a camera. And this pretty much pushed everyone towards the flat era, and not just Apple. And in recent times, of course, flat design is starting to be replaced. Liquid Glass has come out and it's revamped every single icon to have a glass look, and it overall just has glass all over the operating system. So this is actually starting to get replaced too. And yeah, now let's just talk a bit about other stuff in iOS 6 that isn't the design. Siri apparently got expanded massively, and it can now tell you sports scores. So let's see if Siri even works on here. It is quite inconsistent. Siri, tell me MLB scores.
There are 10 MLB games for today.
Games between yesterday and today. You hear that? My iPad Pro M4 in the background started naming off the same thing. But as you can see, we get all the MLB scores. And it also could apparently tell you facts about things like movies. It could now even post tweets, post on Facebook, and launch apps. So let's try to launch an app right now. Siri, launch the camera app. My iPad Pro in the back is still going off. It just launched the camera app back there, but you can see it launched here. Speaking of Facebook, it was now fully integrated into iOS. And you could sign in right from settings, which I doubt works. Do Not Disturb was also added, which is the feature where you can silence all notifications and incoming calls. Phone calls were also improved apparently, as you could reply with a message when declining a call with just one button, or hit the remind me later to call someone back. The Passbook app was added, and this was where you could store things like boarding passes, tickets, and coupons. And this is pretty much a precursor to Apple Wallet. iOS 6 also apparently got some privacy improvements. If you have ever seen the notifications on iOS where they ask for your like location or to track you, and this is where it was implemented on iOS 6. As on previous iOS versions, they could silently track you, which is pretty scary. Safari also got some improvements with things like the offline reading list and iCloud tabs, which was absolutely huge as you could see open pages on all devices you owned. And landscape mode was added for other devices that aren't an iPad, specifically in Safari. Let's try this right now. And yeah, there you go. You can see landscape mode works here. The classic built-in YouTube app was also removed on final versions of iOS 6, although it was on the first beta of iOS 6. And now that we've gone over the specs and history and what's new in iOS 6, let's just explore this device a little bit more. iOS 6 had a pretty underwhelming wallpaper selection, I'm not gonna lie. There's not many options here. I believe it's way lower than any other iOS version, and you don't get many good options here. And a lot of the classic ones were removed here also, like that earth wallpaper, and I mean, at least this one stays. I do really like this like falling leaves wallpaper, but you do get some cool ones like this ocean wallpaper, which comes from iPads on iOS 5, same with this one, and this one's carried over from iOS 4, of course. And you get a bunch of random textured wallpapers, which kind of suck, I'm not gonna lie, and you get a bunch of others that were just carried over. But a lot of them that were carried over did get removed. Know how I mentioned that Facebook was integrated into iOS? Well, so was Twitter. And I mean, this was implemented on iOS 5 though, if you want to see. And there you go, you can see it on iOS 5. I've also got the weather app up and running, and same with stocks. And as I mentioned, I've got some of my albums synced up to this with iTunes. And yeah, that is a look at this very cheap iOS 6 iPhone 5. If you enjoyed this video, please consider dropping a like, subscribing with notifications on, hyping the video, and sharing this to someone that would find this video interesting. Also, please consider checking out my social media accounts, which you'll have in the description and the end card. I have a Twitter, a second YouTube channel where my short form content gets posted, a TikTok, and a Reddit. But yeah, this has been Derek from Certified Legacy, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.
What we do here is go back.
Loud.